In the vast expanse of the galaxy, where civilizations rise and fall like cosmic tides, there exists a universal truth that binds all intelligent species together: the recognition of apex predators. These are creatures so perfectly evolved for death, so precisely crafted by nature's cruel hand, that even the most advanced spacefaring races give them respectful distance. From the crystalline hunters of Vega Prime to the shadow weavers of the Andromeda Spiral, every species understands this fundamental law of survival. But today, in the neutral observation zone of Kepler Station, that law is about to be shattered by the most unlikely of catalysts: a 7-year-old human child with scraped knees, a gap-toothed smile, and absolutely no understanding of why the assembled alien dignitaries are staring at her in frozen terror. The creature before her stands 12 feet tall, its obsidian scales rippling with predatory grace. 6 razor-sharp limbs end in claws that could slice through battle armor like paper. Its 3 heads, each the size of a starship engine, house rows of crystalline teeth that have torn apart metal hulls. This is a Vorthak Prime Alpha, a being so dangerous that entire star systems have been abandoned rather than face one. And little Emma Chen is trying to give it a hug. What follows will challenge everything the galaxy thought it knew about humanity, about predation, and about the strange alchemy that turns the most dangerous encounters into the most beautiful friendships. This is not a story about conquest or warfare. This is about something far more powerful and infinitely more human. This is the story of how a child's fearless heart changed the course of galactic history, one unlikely friendship at a time. The Galactic Cultural Exchange Summit was supposed to be humanity's grand debut on the interstellar stage. After 3 years of careful negotiations, the United Earth Coalition had finally secured observer status in the greater galactic community. The massive space station, Kepler 442, hung in neutral space like a gleaming jewel, its rotating rings housing delegates from 47 different star systems. Ambassador Sarah Chen straightened her formal diplomatic jacket as she watched the alien delegates file into the grand observation chamber through the station's massive windows. Each species maintained careful distance from the others, their various atmospheric requirements and biological incompatibilities creating invisible barriers throughout the room. The Altarians, tall and crystalline, clustered near the nitrogen vents. The aquatic cetaceans floated in their mobile water spheres, while the silicon-based quartzlings stood motionless near the mineral supplement stations. "Mommy, when do I get to meet the aliens?" Emma's voice piped up from beside her, small hands pressed against the reinforced viewing window. Sarah glanced down at her daughter with a mixture of maternal affection and diplomatic anxiety. Bringing Emma to the summit had been unavoidable. David was deployed with the Colonial Marines, and childcare on a frontier station was impossible to arrange on such short notice. The 7-year-old wore her best dress, the blue one with small stars embroidered across the chest, though she'd already managed to scuff her shoes and rumple her hair ribbon. "Soon, sweetheart. Remember what we talked about? We need to be very respectful and—" Ambassador Chen interrupted Dr. Martinez, the xenobiological advisor assigned to the human delegation. His face was pale as he approached, tablet clutched in trembling hands. "We have a problem. A significant problem." "What kind of problem?" "The Vorthak delegation just arrived. They're requesting immediate access to the cultural exchange area for their representative." The words hit Sarah like a meteor strike. Every human who'd studied galactic politics knew about the Vorthak. They were one of the most feared species in known space, apex predators from a death world so hostile that even their plants had evolved defensive weapons. The Vorthak had never participated in any peaceful gathering in recorded history. "That's impossible," Sarah breathed. "The Vorthak don't do diplomacy. They do conquest and consumption." Apparently, this is different. They're claiming it's part of some ancient cultural tradition. The station administrators are in chaos. Half the delegates are demanding immediate evacuation. Through the viewing window, Sarah could see the panic beginning to spread through the chamber below. Species that had been peacefully coexisting moments before were now clustering in defensive formations. The Altarians' crystalline bodies were taking on warning colors. while the cetaceans were ascending toward the ceiling in their spheres, seeking higher ground. "Where is this representative now?" Sarah asked, though she dreaded the answer. "Docking Bay 7. The Vorthak transport ship is unlike anything we've ever seen. It's not technological, it's biological. A living vessel that appears to have grown rather than been built. Mommy, why does everyone look scared?" Before Sarah could answer, the chamber's environmental system shuddered. A low, resonant sound echoed through the station's hull, not mechanical but organic. It was the sound of something massive breathing, something that existed to hunt and kill. The main entrance to the observation chamber dilated open, and security personnel in full combat armor emerged, their weapons drawn but held low. They were followed by Station Commander Okafor, a veteran of the Proxima conflicts whose dark skin had gone ashen. "Ladies and gentlemen," his amplified voice carried across the now silent chamber. "We are about to receive a cultural delegate from the Vorthak hegemony. All species are requested to maintain current positions and avoid sudden movements." The silence that followed was the kind that exists in the moment before lightning strikes. Even the station's atmospheric recyclers seemed to quiet in anticipation. When the Vorthak representative entered, the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. It was impossible to look at directly, this thing that evolution had crafted for perfect lethality. 12 feet of obsidian-scaled death stood on 6 legs, each ending in claws that scraped grooves in the reinforced flooring. Its 3 heads moved independently, scanning the chamber with eyes like burning coals. The middle head was largest, clearly the dominant consciousness, while the 2 flanking heads served as sensory organs, their nostrils flaring as they catalogued the scent of every species present. The creature's body was a masterpiece of predatory design. Muscle groups shifted beneath its scales like tectonic plates, each movement precise and economical. Bone ridges provided natural armor, while specialized organs pulsed visibly beneath its hide, poison sacs perhaps, or acid generators. Its tail, thick as a tree trunk, ended in a cluster of barbed appendages that dripped with substances that hissed when they hit the floor. But it was the intelligence in those burning eyes that made the creature truly terrifying. This wasn't a mindless beast. This was a thinking, calculating predator with the patience and cunning of a chess grandmaster and the physical capability to tear apart a battle cruiser with its bare claws. Every delegate in the chamber took an instinctive step backward. The Altarians' bodies blazed with warning colors so bright they hurt to look at. Several of the smaller species had activated personal shield generators, while others were slowly backing toward the emergency exits. The Vorthak's central head swiveled, studying each species in turn. Its gaze lingered on the humans in the observation gallery above, and Sarah felt her blood turn to ice water. Those eyes seemed to see right through her, cataloging her weaknesses, calculating exactly how many seconds it would take to reach her position and eliminate the threat she might pose. "Citizens of the galactic community," the creature spoke, its voice a harmonic blend of all 3 heads speaking in unison. The translator system struggled with the overlapping frequencies, producing a sound like grinding metal mixed with the crash of ocean waves. "I am designated Kazdaroth of the 3rd Hunting Pride. I come bearing the cultural gifts of my people." The words themselves were diplomatic, but the way the Vorthak spoke them carried undertones of barely restrained violence. This was a being that existed in a state of constant predatory readiness, every cell in its body primed for the kill. Commander Okafor stepped forward with visible effort. "The galactic community welcomes your participation in our cultural exchange. Perhaps you could share with us the nature of your cultural contribution." The Vorthak's 3 heads tilted in what might have been amusement. "We bring the hunt song of the deepest dark. It is the story of how my people learned to find sustenance not just in flesh but in the appreciation of other forms of life." The euphemism was not lost on anyone present. Appreciation in Vorthak culture typically involved determining which parts of another species were most nutritious. In the observation gallery, Emma pressed closer to the window, her small face bright with fascination rather than fear. "Mommy, it's like a dragon. Look how pretty its scales are." Sarah's heart nearly stopped. "Emma, get back from the window now." But her daughter was transfixed. "Why is everyone so scared it hasn't hurt anybody?" Martinez had gone completely white. "Ambassador, we need to evacuate immediately. Children are especially vulnerable to Vorthak hunting instincts. The movement, the scent, the higher vocal frequencies." The Vorthak's sensory heads had already locked on to their position. 3 sets of burning eyes focused on the observation gallery with laser intensity, and the creature's nostrils flared wide as it processed the new scent information. Then something extraordinary happened. The predator's aggressive posture shifted. Its head tilted in what appeared to be confusion, and a sound emerged from its throat. Not the grinding harmonics of its translated speech, but something softer, almost curious. Emma waved from the window, her small hand moving back and forth in the universal gesture of greeting. "Hi, I'm Emma. Are you here to make friends too?" The silence that followed was so complete that the sound of atmospheric recyclers seemed thunderous by comparison. Every being in the chamber, from the smallest squeaker to the largest Titan-class delegate, held perfectly still, waiting to see what the apex predator would do when presented with the most vulnerable possible target. The Vorthak stood motionless for long seconds, its 3 heads focused entirely on the child above. Then, slowly, almost experimentally, it raised one of its 6 arms, the one tipped with claws that could slice through starship hull plating, and moved it back and forth in what could only be described as a return wave. The sound that escaped several delegates was part gasp, part whimper, and part religious invocation. "Did it just, Doctor?" Martinez's voice failed him entirely. Commander Okafor's tactical training kicked in. Security teams maintain positions but do not engage unless directly threatened. All delegates, please remain calm. But calm was the last thing anyone felt as they watched a 7-year-old human child begin what appeared to be an actual conversation with the galaxy's most feared apex predator. Emma pressed both hands against the window now, her excitement palpable. "You're really big. Are you strong too?" "I bet you're super strong." The Vorthak's central head tilted, and when it spoke again, the translation carried undertones that the universal language matrix struggled to interpret. "Small flesh thing queries strength capability of Kostaroth?" "My name is Emma, not small flesh thing," the child corrected with the matter-of-fact directness that only 7-year-olds possessed. "And yes, I asked if you're strong. You look really strong." Another impossible moment as the predator seemed to consider this. Kostaroth possesses strength sufficient to rend metal shells and crack stone bones. Emma designation wishes demonstration? Sarah's diplomatic training warred with her maternal instincts. On one hand, first contact protocols demanded careful cultural sensitivity. On the other hand, her daughter was casually chatting with a creature that had just offered to demonstrate its ability to tear apart starships. "Maybe later," Emma said with the casual dismissal of a child who was already bored with one topic and ready to move to the next. "Do you want to see my drawings? I drew some aliens, but I didn't know what you look like, so I drew a dragon instead. But now I can draw you." She reached into her small backpack and pulled out a coloring tablet, the kind designed for children with impact-resistant casing and simple controls. The mundane object seemed surreal in the context of interstellar diplomacy and apex predators. "Emma designation creates visual representations?" The Vorthak's voice carried a new note. Was it actually curiosity? "Uh-huh, look, this is the crystal people, and these are the water people in their bubbles. And this is supposed to be humans, but I'm not very good at drawing faces yet." She held up the tablet, displaying her childish artwork. The drawings were exactly what you'd expect from a 7-year-old. Stick figures with geometric shapes for bodies, everything rendered in bold primary colors with liberal use of glitter effects. The Vorthak stared at the tablet for so long that several delegates began to worry that it was entering some kind of hunting trance. Its three heads moved independently, studying the images from different angles, while subtle scent-sampling sound suggested it was trying to analyze the electronic device through olfactory means. These representations, they lack accuracy in proportional relationships and dimensional consistency, the Predator finally announced. Yet they contain intentional aesthetic choices. It took a moment for the translation algorithms to process that statement, and when they did, the result sent a shockwave through the assembled delegates. The Vorthak, a species known for viewing all other life forms as either prey or competitors, had just offered what amounted to art criticism. Emma nodded enthusiastically. "Yeah, I'm still learning. Mrs. Patterson says I need to work on my perspective. But look, I can make them move." She tapped the tablet screen, activating a simple animation feature that made her drawings dance and wave. The stick figure aliens bounced around the screen in jerky, childlike motion, accompanied by cheerful electronic music. The effect on the Vorthak was immediate and profound. All three heads jerked backward as if struck, and a sound emerged from its throat that the translators couldn't even begin to interpret. A complex harmonic that seemed to contain surprise, confusion, and something that might have been wonder. "The representations possess temporal dimension," it breathed, and for the first time its voice carried no undertones of threat or predatory calculation. "They exist, then exist differently, then return to original existence state. It's just animation," Emma explained as if she were teaching a basic concept to a particularly slow student. "It's not real movement, it's just lots of pictures that change really fast so your brain thinks they're moving. Want to try making one?" The question hung in the air like a live grenade with a pulled pin. Around the chamber, 47 different species of intelligent life waited to see if the galaxy's most feared predator would accept an art lesson from a human child. The Vorthak extended one claw-tipped arm toward the tablet, then stopped. Kajtaroth's manipulation appendages designed for rending and tearing. "Creation requires different application." "That's okay," Emma said brightly. "You just have to be gentle. Here, like this." In a moment that would be recorded in galactic history textbooks for millennia to come, 7-year-old Emma Chen reached through the viewing window's access port, a port that should have been sealed but had been opened for atmospheric testing, and gently guided the razor-sharp claw of an apex predator to touch her coloring tablet. The silence was deafening. Security officers had their weapons halfway to firing position before Commander Okafor's urgent hand signal froze them in place. Sarah's maternal scream died in her throat as she watched her daughter, completely unaware of the danger, guide claws capable of slicing through battle armor to gently tap colored pixels on a children's toy. "You just touch here, and it makes a line. If you touch here, it changes colors. And if you hold down here, it makes bigger lines." The Vorthak's three heads were so close to the small access port that its breathing fogged the reinforced glass. Those burning eyes designed to track fast-moving prey across alien battlefields were focused with absolute intensity on colored pixels appearing and disappearing on a 7-inch screen. "Fascinating," it murmured, and the word carried harmonics that suggested genuine intellectual engagement rather than predatory assessment. Visual manifestation responds to intentional contact. Each modification persists until deliberately altered. "Exactly. Now you try. Draw something you like." What followed was perhaps the most surreal 5 minutes in the history of interstellar diplomacy. A creature evolved for perfect lethality whose species had never been known to create anything except corpses and devastation, slowly and carefully began to create its first work of art. The Vorthak's initial attempts were jagged and uncertain, unsurprising given that its claws were designed for slicing, not fine motor control. But with Emma's patient encouragement and increasingly excited suggestions, something began to take shape on the screen. "What is it?" Emma asked, studying the angular black lines that the predator had carefully constructed. "Home nest location," the Vorthak replied. "Where egg nursery exists beneath the painstones." The translation was awkward, but the meaning was clear. The most dangerous predator in known space had just drawn a picture of home. "It's beautiful," Emma declared with the absolute conviction that only children possess. "I love the pointy parts. They look like mountains." Pain stones are mountains in Emma Designation's understanding? Well, sort of. Mountains are really big rocks that stick up from the ground. Some of them have snow on top, and some have trees, and some have caves where animals live. Emma Designation's home nest possesses similar elevated geological formations. I don't know what that means, but I live on Earth. It has lots of mountains and oceans and forests and cities. And ice cream. Do you have ice cream where you live? The Vorthak's heads tilted in unison. Ice cream is frozen nutritional supplement? It's the best frozen nutritional supplement. It comes in lots of flavors and it makes you happy when you eat it. For several seconds, the predator seemed to process this concept. Sustenance that produces emotional satisfaction beyond nutritional requirement? Yeah. Want me to tell you about all the flavors? And that was how Emma Chen, age 7, began explaining the cultural significance of ice cream to a 12-foot-tall apex predator, while 47 species of galactic civilization watched in stunned silence. She described chocolate and vanilla and strawberry with the passionate enthusiasm that children brought to their favorite subjects, while the Vorthak listened with an attention typically reserved for tracking wounded prey. Remarkable, the predator finally said. Emma Designation species creates nutritional variety for aesthetic and emotional purposes rather than purely biological necessity. Well, duh, Emma replied with devastating 7-year-old logic. What's the point of eating if it doesn't make you happy? The question seemed to hit the Vorthak like a physical blow. Its 3 heads drew back, and for a long moment it stood perfectly still, processing this revolutionary concept. What's the point of eating if it doesn't make you happy? It repeated slowly, as if tasting each word. Kaztaroth has never considered sustenance in terms of happiness generation. Food should make you happy. That's like the whole point. Dr. Martinez was frantically taking notes on his tablet, documenting what appeared to be a fundamental shift in predator psychology happening in real time. Around the chamber, delegates who had been frozen in terror were beginning to show signs of curiosity rather than fear. The impossible was happening. The Vorthak was being domesticated, civilized. The concept seemed too strange to contemplate, yet the evidence was right before their eyes. Tell Kaztaroth more about happiness food, the predator requested, and its voice carried an eagerness that seemed completely at odds with its terrifying appearance. Emma's face lit up. There's so much to tell you. There's cake and cookies and candy and... Oh, do you want to share my snacks? Mommy packed some crackers and juice boxes. Sarah's diplomatic poker face finally cracked. Her daughter had just offered to share snacks with a creature that could eat them both as appetizers. Emma Designation offers sustenance sharing. The Vortak's voice carried what the translators interpreted as profound confusion. This is gift behavior? It's not a gift, it's just being nice. Friends share food. Friends, the predator repeated the word like it was spoken in an alien language. Kaztaroth is friend to Emma Designation? Well, yeah, we're talking and sharing and making art together. That's what friends do. The silence that followed was different from the terrified hush of earlier moments. This was the silence of minds trying to process something completely outside their previous experience. The concept of a Vorthak having a friend, especially a human child friend, was so beyond the realm of possibility that several species' translation systems actually crashed trying to process the implications. Commander Okafor stepped forward carefully, his military training warring with his diplomatic responsibilities. Kaztaroth, on behalf of the galactic community, we welcome this unprecedented cultural exchange. The Vorthak's attention shifted from Emma to the commander, and for a moment, the old predatory assessment returned to its bearing. But then its gaze returned to the child, and the tension seemed to drain from its massive frame. Kaztaroth accepts friendship offering from Emma Designation, it announced formally. This constitutes new cultural experience for Kaztaroth's species. Can I draw you now? I want to get your scales right. They're really pretty. They look like they have little rainbows in them. So began the strangest art session in galactic history, with a 7-year-old human child carefully studying the anatomical details of an apex predator while said predator posed with patient stillness, occasionally offering gentle corrections when Emma's artistic interpretation didn't match biological reality. What none of them knew, not the assembled delegates, was that this moment would become the foundation for a friendship that would reshape the political landscape of the galaxy, challenge every assumption about predator and prey relationships, and prove that sometimes the most powerful force in the universe is a child's absolute certainty that everyone deserves to be treated with kindness. The Cultural Exchange Summit was supposed to last 3 days. Instead, it would become the beginning of the most unlikely partnership in galactic history, and the first chapter in what historians would later call the Great Friendship that changed everything. 3 days had passed since the initial encounter, and Kepler Station had become the center of the galactic news cycle. Reporters from every major network were clamoring for access, xenobiologists were requesting emergency research permits, and diplomatic channels that had been silent for centuries were suddenly buzzing with activity. But for Emma Chen, the most important thing was that she had made a new friend. She sat cross-legged on the floor of the Cultural Exchange Chamber, which had been converted into an informal meeting space. The massive tables and formal seating arrangements had been pushed aside to create an open area where Emma and Kastaroth could interact more comfortably. Well, as comfortably as possible when one party stood 12 feet tall and possessed enough natural weaponry to level a small building. No, the third head goes more like this. Emma was explaining, sketching enthusiastically on her tablet while Kastaro watched with all 6 eyes focused on her movements. See, it's turned a little bit that way because it's listening to something. The Vorthak's sensory head swiveled to mimic the position Emma had drawn, and she clapped in approval. Perfect, you're a really good model. Model, Kastaroth repeated, testing the word. Emma designation assigns Kastaroth the role of template for artistic creation, though you don't have to be so formal all the time. My friends at school just call me Emma. Emma, the predator said carefully, dropping the formal designation for the first time. This is less formal address pattern? What do your friends call you? Kazantaro is really hard to say. The question seemed to puzzle the Vorthak. Its 3 heads tilted independently, a behavior Emma had learned meant it was thinking hard about something Kajtaroth has not previously experienced, friend address patterns. Vortak's social structure operates on dominance hierarchies and hunting pack dynamics. Emma's brow furrowed in the way it did when adults said things that didn't make sense to her. But what about when you were little? What did your mom call you? Brood parent designated Kaztaroth as third spawned of suitable lethality, the predator replied matter-of-factly. Emma stared at him for a moment, then shook her head decisively. That's terrible. No wonder you don't have friends. Nobody wants to be friends with someone whose mom calls them suitable lethality. The observation was delivered with such casual certainty that even the Vorthak seemed taken aback. Emma finds brood parent designation inadequate. It's not a name, it's like a job description. Your mom should have given you a nice name. Emma tapped her finger against her lips, thinking, what if I call you Kaz? That's much easier to say, and it sounds friendly. Kaz, the predator repeated slowly. This is diminutive address form? It's a nickname. All my friends have nicknames. There's Tommy. His real name is Thomas, and Danny and Susie and Mikey. Having a nickname means people like you enough to make your name easier to say. Martinez, who was documenting everything from a respectful distance, paused in his note-taking. The psychological implications of what he was witnessing were staggering. A species that had never demonstrated any form of social bonding beyond pack-hunting dynamics was not only accepting social recategorization, but actively engaging in the process.
Kastaroth would accept designation as Kaz from Emma?
We're friends, aren't we? The simple question seemed to resonate through the chamber. Even after 3 days, the concept of the Vorthak having a friend remained shocking to everyone except Emma, who had accepted it as naturally as she accepted that water was wet and sugar was sweet. Yes, Kaz said, and for the first time his voice carried warmth alongside the usual harmonics of communication. Kastaroth, Kasta's friend to Emma. Great, now hold still while I get your tale right. It's really complicated with all those spiky bits. As she worked, Sarah Chen watched from the observation area above, her emotions torn between maternal pride and diplomatic terror. Her daughter had accomplished something that had eluded the galaxy's greatest minds for centuries. She had successfully communicated with a Vorthak on a meaningful level. But the situation remained precarious and every moment brought new complications. Ambassador, Commander Okafor's voice was quiet as he approached her position. We need to discuss the situation. Sarah nodded, not taking her eyes off her daughter. What's the status? Mixed, to put it mildly. The Vorthak delegation has been remarkably cooperative. They've agreed to extend their stay indefinitely and have actually requested permission to establish a permanent cultural exchange presence. On the other hand, 6 species have lodged formal protests claiming that humanity is somehow manipulating or controlling the Vorthak for strategic advantage. That's ridiculous, Sarah replied, though she could understand the concern. Emma's 7 years old. She doesn't have strategic advantages. She has juice boxes and coloring tablets. I know that and you know that, but the Altarians are convinced it's some kind of psychological warfare technique. They're demanding a full investigation by the Galactic Ethics Committee. Down below, Emma had finished her latest drawing and was showing it to Kaz with obvious pride. Look, I got all your heads this time, and I remembered the stripes on your scales. Kaz studied the tablet carefully, his 3 heads moving independently to examine the artwork from different angles. Emma's artistic skill demonstrates significant improvement. The proportional relationships are more accurate, and the detail work shows enhanced observational capability. Want to try drawing me now? The predator accepted the tablet with delicate care, his massive claws managing the delicate touchscreen with surprising precision. Over the past 3 days, he had become remarkably adept at controlling his natural strength to accommodate the fragile human technology. Emma's physical structure presents interesting artistic challenges, Kaz mused as he began to draw. Bilateral symmetry, limited appendages, unusual coloration patterns. Hey, Emma protested with a giggle. I don't have unusual coloration patterns. This is what humans look like. Kaz apologizes. In comparison to Vorthak's physiology, human appearance parameters are unexpected, but not unpleasant, he added quickly, having learned that Emma was sensitive about perceived criticism. As the unlikely pair continued their art session, Dr. Martinez approached Commander Okafor and Ambassador Chen with his latest observations. This is unprecedented, he said, keeping his voice low. We're witnessing the development of an interspecies social bond that shouldn't be possible according to everything we know about Vorthak psychology. How is it possible? Sarah asked. What makes Emma special in this regard? I've been analyzing the interaction patterns, and I think it's a combination of factors. First, Emma lacks the fear response that every other sentient being has toward Vorthak. She doesn't trigger their predator-prey recognition patterns because she genuinely doesn't see Kaz as a threat. That's because she's too young to understand the danger, Commander Okafor pointed out. Exactly! But there's more. Emma's communication style is completely non-hierarchical. She doesn't try to establish dominance or submission, concepts that are central to all Vorthak social interactions. She simply treats Kaz as an equal, which is something he's never experienced. Sarah watched her daughter patiently explaining shading techniques to a creature that could bite her in half without effort. You're saying her ignorance is actually an advantage? Emma approaches the relationship with no preconceptions about what should or shouldn't be possible. To her, making friends is a natural process that doesn't require justification or strategic planning. Down in the chamber, Emma had moved on from art to snack time and was carefully explaining the proper way to eat crackers to her towering friend. See, you put the cheese on top of the cracker like this. It tastes better when they're together. Kaz examined the tiny piece of food with the same intensity he'd once reserved for studying potential prey. The combination creates enhanced flavor profiles? Yep, try it. The sight of a 12-foot apex predator delicately picking up a cheese cracker with claws designed for disemboweling enemies was surreal enough to make several observers question their sanity. But what was even more remarkable was the careful way Kaz consumed the tiny morsel, processing not just its nutritional value but its taste and texture. Fascinating, he concluded. The cheese component provides fat-based richness that complements the grain-based foundation. This is pleasant. Food should make you happy, Emma declared, offering him another cracker. That's like rule number 1 of eating. The concept continued to intrigue Kaz, who had spent his entire existence viewing sustenance purely in terms of necessity and dominance assertion. The idea that food could be a source of pleasure rather than just fuel was revolutionizing his understanding of existence itself. Emma, he said carefully, Kaz wishes to understand more about human pleasure food culture. Emma's eyes lit up with the enthusiasm of a child who had found someone genuinely interested in her favorite subject. Oh, there's so much to tell you. Ice cream is just the beginning. There's also cake and candy and cookies and... She paused, struck by a sudden thought. Wait, do you want to help me make cookies? My mom taught me how, and they're really fun to make. The question sent a ripple of shock through the observing delegates. Cooking, the transformation of raw materials into sustenance, was one of the most fundamental cultural activities of any civilization. The idea of a Vorthak participating in food preparation rather than simply consuming what it had killed was almost incomprehensible. Emma suggests Kaz participate in food creation process? The Predator's voice carried genuine curiosity mixed with confusion. It's really fun. You mix all the ingredients together and then you shape them and then they get cooked. And then you have cookies. Want to try? Before anyone could object, Emma had already started pulling ingredients from her mother's emergency supply kit. Sarah kept a small portable cooking setup for situations where station food wasn't suitable for a 7-year-old's dietary needs, but she'd never imagined it would be used for interspecies diplomacy. Emma, Sarah called down from the observation deck, maybe we should ask Commander Okafor if it's okay to use the cooking equipment first. Oops, sorry, Mommy. Emma looked up contritely, then turned to Kaz. We have to ask permission first. That's being polite. Kaz understands. Permission-seeking behavior demonstrates respect for territorial boundaries. Commander Okafor, who was rapidly discovering that his military training had not prepared him for managing a friendship between a human child and an apex predator, made a quick decision. Permission granted, Emma, but let's keep it simple, okay? Yay! Emma began arranging her ingredients with the methodical precision of a 7-year-old who took her cooking seriously. Okay, Kaz, first we need to measure everything. This is flour, and this is sugar, and this is butter. She carefully explained each ingredient while Kaz listened with the focused attention of a student learning a new combat technique. His questions were surprisingly sophisticated, demonstrating an analytical mind that wanted to understand not just the process but the reasoning behind each step. The heating process triggers chemical reactions that alter molecular structures, he asked as Emma explained the concept of baking. It makes the cookies get hard and taste good? Emma offered, having reached the limits of her technical knowledge. My mom could explain the science part better. Kaz finds the process intellectually stimulating, regardless of technical comprehension level, the Predator assured her. As they worked together, Emma doing the actual handling while Kaz provided steady hands for holding bowls and careful strength for mixing, something remarkable began to happen. The delegates who had been watching from a safe distance started moving closer. The initial terror was giving way to fascination as they witnessed behaviors from the Vorthak that contradicted everything they thought they knew about the species. The Altarians were the first to approach, their crystalline bodies pulsing with colors that indicated scientific curiosity rather than fear. Query to Vorthak entity, cultural food preparation represents standard behavior pattern for your species. Kaz's 3 heads turned toward the crystalline beings, and for a moment the old predatory assessment flickered in his eyes. Then he glanced back at Emma, who was carefully measuring vanilla extract, and his posture relaxed. Negative. Food preparation represents new behavioral exploration initiated through friendship interaction with human designation, Emma. The response sent another shockwave through the chamber. The Vorthak had just admitted to behavioral modification based on social bonding, something that their species had never been observed to do. One of the cetacean delegates floated closer in their mobile water sphere. Clarification requested. Vorthak entity experiences positive emotional response to food preparation activity? Affirmative, Kaz replied without hesitation. Process generates satisfaction beyond nutritional necessity. Emma designation has introduced Kaz to concept of pleasure-based sustenance interaction. Emma looked up from her measuring cup, completely oblivious to the historical significance of what was happening. See? I told you food should make you happy. Kaz gets it. Dr. Martinez was scribbling notes frantically, trying to document what appeared to be real-time psychological evolution in an apex predator species. The implications were staggering. If Vorthak could experience pleasure-based rather than purely survival-based motivations, it fundamentally altered the galactic understanding of their nature. Emma, called one of the squeaker delegates, their tiny voice amplified through their environmental suit. Question for small human. How did you know that friendship making was possible with Vorthak entity? I didn't know, she said finally. I just thought he looked lonely. The simple answer hit the chamber like a meteor strike. In 4 words, a 7-year-old had summarized a psychological insight that had eluded galactic researchers for centuries. The most feared predator in known space was lonely. Kaz went very still, his 3 heads turning to focus on Emma with an expression that the translators couldn't adequately interpret. Emma perceived loneliness in Kaz. Well, yeah, Emma said matter-of-factly, returning to her cooking. You came all this way just to meet people, but everyone was too scared to talk to you. That must have felt really sad. The observation was delivered with such casual empathy that its profound implications took several seconds to sink in. Emma hadn't seen a monster when she looked at Kaz. She had seen someone who needed a friend. Kaz was lonely, the predator said slowly, as if testing the concept. This emotional state was observable to Emma? You just looked like you wanted someone to play with, Emma explained, beginning to shape the cookie dough with practiced 7-year-old efficiency. Like when I'm at a new school and don't know anybody yet. The comparison was so simple and yet so revolutionary that several delegates had to sit down. The idea that a Vorthak could experience the same basic emotions as other sentient beings, loneliness, the desire for companionship, social uncertainty, challenged fundamental assumptions about predator psychology. As Emma and Kaz worked together to shape their cookies, placing them carefully on the portable baking sheet, the atmosphere in the chamber continued to shift. What had started as a terrifying first contact scenario was evolving into something unprecedented, genuine interspecies friendship based on mutual understanding and shared experiences. There, Emma announced as they slid the cookies into the small oven. Now we wait for them to bake. Want to play a game while we wait? Kaz would find game playing acceptable, the predator replied, and his voice carried an anticipation that would have been impossible to imagine just days earlier. As Emma began explaining the rules of a simple drawing game, observers throughout the chamber realized they were witnessing history in the making. This wasn't just first contact. This was the birth of a new kind of relationship between species, built not on fear or dominance or strategic advantage, but on the simple human truth that everyone deserves kindness and friendship. The cookies would be ready in 15 minutes, but the friendship they represented would reshape the galaxy for generations to come. 2 weeks into what was becoming the longest cultural exchange summit in galactic history, Emma Chen had established herself as an informal ambassador between humanity and the Vorthak. Every morning, she would arrive at the cultural chamber with her backpack full of art supplies, snacks, and whatever new things she wanted to share with Kaz that day. Every evening, she would leave with stories about their adventures that would make her mother's hair stand on end. Today was different, though. Today, Emma had convinced her mother to let her bring something special. "Kaz!" Emma called as she bounded into the chamber, her excitement palpable. "I brought you a present!" The massive predator, who had been examining a holographic display of Vorthak hunting strategies with a group of fascinated military analysts, immediately abandoned the tactical discussion. His 3 heads turned toward Emma with an attention that was both touching and terrifying in its intensity. "Emma brings gift offering to Kaz?" His voice carried the warm undertones that had become familiar over their weeks of friendship, though the concept of gift-giving still seemed to puzzle him. "Yep. Close your eyes. Well, all your eyes," Emma corrected, having learned that Kaz had 6 eyes total across his 3 heads. "It's a surprise." The sight of a 12-foot apex predator obediently closing all 6 eyes at the request of a 7-year-old human caused several observers to reach for recording devices. This level of trust between species was unprecedented in galactic history. "No peeking," Emma warned as she struggled to extract something from her oversized backpack. "Okay, you can look now." Kaz opened his eyes to see Emma holding a stuffed animal, a small, plush dragon with purple scales and tiny wings. It was clearly well-loved, with slightly matted fur and a missing button eye that had been replaced with a piece of blue fabric. "This is Mr. Snuggles," Emma announced proudly. "He's been my best friend since I was really little, but I thought you might like to have him, since you look kind of like a dragon." The silence in the chamber was profound. A human child had just offered to give away her beloved childhood toy to an alien predator. The gesture was so purely generous, so completely without strategic consideration, that even the most cynical observers were moved. Kaz stared at the stuffed dragon for a long moment, his head tilting in the thoughtful pose that Emma had learned meant he was processing something emotionally complex. "Emma offers treasured possession to Kaz? He's really special," Emma said seriously. "He helped me not be scared when there were thunderstorms, and he always listened when I had bad dreams. I think you might get lonely sometimes too, so maybe he could help you not be scared either." Dr. Martinez, who had been documenting the interaction, felt his eyes begin to water. The psychological sophistication of what Emma was doing, recognizing emotional need in an alien being and responding with empathy and generosity, was beyond what most adults could manage. "Kaz does not experience fear," the predator said, though his voice lacked its usual certainty. "Everybody gets scared sometimes," Emma replied with the matter-of-fact wisdom of childhood. "Even really big, strong people. It's okay to be scared. That's why we need friends to help us feel better." Around the chamber, delegates who had spent careers studying interspecies psychology realized they were witnessing a breakthrough that could reshape their understanding of emotional universality across species. Barriers. Kaz extended one massive claw toward the stuffed dragon, then stopped. "Kaz's appendages designed for combat applications. Mr. Snuggles appears delicate." "You just have to be gentle," Emma said, taking his claw and guiding it to touch the soft plush fur. "See? You're good at being gentle. You've been gentle with my art stuff and my food." The moment when Kaz's razor-sharp claw made contact with the stuffed animal was captured by dozens of recording devices, but none of them could adequately convey the emotional weight of what was happening. This was trust in its purest form, a child believing so completely in her friend's goodness that she would entrust him with her most precious possession. "Mr. Snuggles is soft," Kaz observed, his voice carrying wonder. "Texture designed for comfort rather than function." "That's the point! Want to hold him? I'll show you how." With infinite patience, Emma guided Kaz through the process of properly holding a stuffed animal. It took several attempts to find a grip that was secure without being crushing, but eventually the apex predator was cradling the tiny dragon against his massive chest with surprising tenderness. "Unusual sensation," Kaz murmured, and the harmonics in his voice suggested he was experiencing something entirely new. Physical contact without dominance or submission implications. "That's called a hug," Emma explained. "It makes you feel safe and happy. Do you like it?" "Kaz finds the experience pleasant," he admitted, and several observers noted that this was the closest the predator had ever come to expressing pure emotion. Commander Okafor chose that moment to approach with news that would test this newfound friendship in ways nobody could have anticipated. Emma, Ambassador Chen would like to speak with you and Kaz. There's been a development. Emma looked up from where she was demonstrating proper stuffed animal cuddling technique. Is it about the meeting today? Mom said some important people were coming to visit.
Something like that, the commander said carefully. 20 minutes later, Emma and Kaz found themselves in the station's main conference room, surrounded by high-ranking officials from multiple species. Ambassador Chen sat at the head of the table, her diplomatic composure barely masking maternal concern. Across from her sat Admiral Zhang of the Colonial Marine Corps, whose presence immediately made the stakes clear.
Emma, sweetheart, her mother began gently, these are some very important people who wanted to meet you and Kaz. They have some questions about your friendship. Emma looked around the room with the frank assessment of a 7-year-old sizing up a group of adults. Are you here to make sure I'm being good? Because I haven't broken any rules or anything. Admiral Zhang leaned forward, his weathered face attempting a reassuring smile. Nothing like that, Emma. We're just trying to understand something very special that you've accomplished here. Making friends isn't an accomplishment, Emma said with the blunt honesty that adults often found uncomfortable. It's just what you do, but most people can't make friends with Vorthak, pointed out Dr. Cogmany. Vashi, the Altarian delegate whose crystalline body was pulsing with nervous yellow patterns. Your friendship with Kaz Terethiz is unprecedented. Kaz, who had remained silent throughout the introductions, finally spoke. Emma's friendship offering was unexpected but genuine. Kaz responds to authentic social interaction. J. Emma, Zheng said, Emma, what you've done here is remarkable. You've achieved peaceful contact with a species that has never engaged in diplomatic relations before. The implications for galactic security are enormous. Emma frowned, picking up on undertones she didn't fully understand. Galactic security? That sounds scary. Kaz isn't scary. He's my friend.
We understand that, Ambassador Chen interjected quickly, but some people are worried about what this friendship might mean for the future. What kind of future? Emma asked, and her voice carried the first hint of suspicion.
It was Admiral Zhang who delivered the blow that would test everything Emma and Kaz had built together. Emma, how would you feel about helping us learn more about Vortec culture?
Maybe spending some time on Earth teaching other children how to be friends with people like Kaz? The question seemed innocent enough, but Kaz's reaction was immediate and profound. All three of his heads snapped to attention, and the predatory alertness that had been absent for weeks returned in full force. Clarification required. His voice carried harmonics that made several officials reach for panic buttons.
Emma would be relocated away from Kepler Station? Just temporarily, Admiral Zhang assured him, though his hand had moved to his sidearm. For educational purposes. And Kaz? Emma asked, her child's instinct for fairness cutting straight to the heart of the matter. Would Kaz come too? The pause that followed was answer enough. Emma's face went through a series of expressions, confusion, understanding, and then anger. You want to separate us, she said, and her 7-year-old voice carried the kind of moral clarity that made adults ashamed of their complicated schemes. You want to take me away from my friend. Emma, it's not that simple, her mother began, but Emma was already standing up from her chair. Yes, it is. It's exactly that simple. Tears were beginning to form in her eyes. You think Kaz is dangerous, so you want to take me away from him. But he's not dangerous. He's my friend. Kaz rose to his full height, and suddenly the conference room felt very small. His massive frame cast shadows over the assembled officials, and the predatory grace that had been softened by weeks of friendship reasserted itself with alarming intensity. Emma experiences distress due to proposed separation, he observed, and his voice carried undertones that made primitive survival instincts scream warnings in every human brain present. Kaz, please remain calm, Commander Okafor said, his hand moving to his communicator to call security. Kaz is calm, Emma declared, spinning to face the adults with fury that was magnificent in its righteousness. He's not the one trying to break up a friendship. He's not the one being mean.
The accusation hit the room like a physical blow. Around the table, some of the most powerful individuals in galactic civilization found themselves being lectured on morality by a 7-year-old. And the worst part was that she was absolutely right. "Emma," Admiral Zhang tried again. "You don't understand the larger implications. I understand that you're trying to take me away from my friend." Emma shot back. "And that's mean and wrong, and I won't let you do it." She marched over to where Kaz stood and wrapped her small arms around one of his massive legs in a protective hug. "Kaz is good and kind and gentle, and if you can't see that, then you're the ones who are scary." The sight of a tiny human child defending a towering apex predator from a room full of adults was so powerfully symbolic that several observers would later cite it as the moment they truly understood what they were witnessing, not just a friendship, but a complete reframing of what relationship between species could be. Kaz looked down at Emma clinging to his leg, then raised his gaze to the assembled officials. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight of authority that reminded everyone exactly what kind of being they were dealing with. "Emma demonstrates loyalty behavior in face of perceived threat to friendship bond. Kaz recognizes this as significant trust indicator." "Mr. Kastarothak," Dr. Vashi spoke carefully, "surely you understand the concerns of the galactic community. Your species has never engaged in peaceful... Kaz's species has never been offered genuine friendship." The Predator interrupted, and his words carried a finality that silenced the room. "Emma offered friendship without conditions, without strategic considerations, without fear. Kaz responds with equivalent loyalty." Admiral Zheng leaned forward, his military training warring with his diplomatic instructions. "And what does that loyalty entail exactly?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Kaz's 3 heads turned to regard the Admiral with the focused attention he typically reserved for prey assessment, and for a moment the old predatory calculation was visible in his burning eyes. "Kaz protects what Kaz values," he said simply, and the threat was all the more powerful for being understated. Emma looked up at her friend, then back at the adults who were trying to separate them. "See? Kaz protects his friends. That's what good friends do. If you were good friends, you'd protect our friendship instead of trying to break it up." The moral logic was unassailable, and it left the assembled officials in an impossible position. They had come expecting to manage a simple diplomatic situation, but instead found themselves confronting something far more complex, a genuine emotional bond that transcended species boundaries. Ambassador Chen looked at her daughter, seeing not just the child she had raised, but the remarkable young person Emma was becoming. "Emma, what if we could find a way for you and Kaz to stay together? Would you be willing to help teach others about friendship?" Emma considered this carefully, still maintaining her protective stance near Kaz. "Only if Kaz wants to. And only if nobody tries to make him do scary things or hurt him." "Define scary things," Admiral Zheng requested. "Tests and experiments and stuff that treats him like he's not a person," Emma replied with devastating precision. "Kaz is my friend, not a science project." Martinez cleared his throat. From a xenopsychological perspective, Emma raises valid concerns. The relationship we're observing appears to be genuinely reciprocal. Any attempt to study it through traditional methodologies could damage or destroy the very phenomenon we're trying to understand. "Then what do you suggest?" asked Dr. Vashi. Emma answered before any of the adults could speak. "Treat Kaz like you'd want to be treated. Like a friend, not a monster. Let us be friends without making it into something scary." She paused, considering something, then added, "And maybe let Kaz meet other kids too. Not for experiments or anything, just because friends like meeting other friends." The suggestion was so practical, so fundamentally sensible that it highlighted how unnecessarily complicated the adults had been making everything. A 7-year-old had just proposed a solution that addressed everyone's concerns while maintaining the integrity of the relationship they all wanted to study. Kaz looked down at Emma with what could only be described as pride. Emma demonstrates wisdom beyond age parameters. Admiral Zheng exchanged glances with the other officials, silently acknowledging that they had been outmaneuvered by a child and an apex predator who had learned the power of friendship. "Very well," he said finally.
We'll proceed according to Emma's guidelines, but this will require careful coordination and no trying to trick us or separate us," Emma added firmly. "Promise?" The adults around the table, military leaders, diplomats, scientists who had spent careers navigating the complexities of interstellar politics, found themselves being asked to make a promise to a 7-year-old girl who had single-handedly revolutionized galactic diplomacy. "Promise," Ambassador Chen said, speaking for the group. Emma smiled for the first time since the meeting began. "Good. Now can Kaz and I go back to playing? We were in the middle of a really good drawing game." As the officials watched Emma and Kaz leave the conference room, the child chattering excitedly about her next artistic project while the apex predator listened with devoted attention, they realized that they had just witnessed something unprecedented. A negotiation where innocence and friendship had triumphed over fear and political calculation. The real test of their newly formed alliance was yet to come, but for now the most important thing had been preserved, a friendship that proved some bonds transcend every boundary the universe could create. 6 months after their first meeting, Emma and Kaz had become galactic celebrities. News networks across 47 star systems carried regular updates about their friendship. Xenobiologists published papers about their interaction patterns, and diplomatic academies had added the Chen-Kaj-Taroth protocols to their curriculum. But for Emma, the most exciting thing was that today she was going to see Kaz's home. The Vorthak delegation had extended an unprecedented invitation. Emma and a small diplomatic party would visit their homeworld as part of a cultural exchange program. It was the first time in recorded galactic history that any non-Vorthak had been invited to their planet, and Emma was practically vibrating with excitement. "Remember," her mother was saying for the 100th time as they prepared to board the Vorthak bioship, "this is a very different world from what you're used to. You need to stay close to Kaz and do exactly what he says, okay?" She was wearing her best dress, the one with stars on it, because Kaz had told her that first impressions were important in Vorthak culture, and she wanted to make a good impression on his family. "Will Kaz's mom like me?" she asked for the 10th time, betraying the nervousness she was trying to hide. "Kaz's brood parent will find Emma interesting," Kaz replied diplomatically. He had been trying to prepare both Emma and the human delegation for what they would encounter, but there were some aspects of Vorthak culture that were difficult to explain to beings who hadn't evolved on a death world. The bioship itself was a marvel that defied human understanding of technology. Instead of metal and circuits, it was grown rather than built, a massive living creature that served as both vessel and symbiotic partner to its Vorthak crew. The walls pulsed gently with a rhythm reminiscent of a heartbeat, and organic conduits carried nutrients and information throughout the ship's body. "It's alive!" Emma breathed in wonder as they boarded, reaching out to touch the warm, slightly yielding surface of the corridor wall. "Indeed," Kaz confirmed. "Bioships are cultivated from deep cave organisms. This vessel has served Kaz's hunting pack for 17 standard years." Dr. Martinez, who was part of the diplomatic team, was frantically taking readings with his instruments. "The biological integration is incredible. The ship appears to be a fully sentient organism that has formed a cooperative relationship with its Vorthak crew." "Do they have names?" Emma asked, patting the wall gently. "It seems mean to just call them ships if they're alive." "This vessel is designated Throat Ripper of the Deep Hunt," Kaz replied matter-of-factly. Emma wrinkled her nose. "That's a scary name. Can I call her something nicer?" The question clearly puzzled Kaz, who had never considered that a bioship might appreciate a friendly nickname. "Emma wishes to assign alternative designation to transport vessel. That's sort of like Ripper, but friendlier." As if in response to the suggestion, the ship's walls pulsed with a warmer tone, and a sound that might have been approval resonated through the organic corridors. Even Kaz seemed surprised by the vessel's reaction. "Interesting. Throat Ripper Ripley appears responsive to Emma's friendly address patterns." The journey to the Vorthak homeworld took 3 days, during which Emma established herself as the ship's unofficial goodwill ambassador.
She spent hours in conversation with Ripley, learning how to interpret the bioship's emotional responses through changes in wall temperature and pulse patterns. By the end of the journey, she had taught the ancient organism several human children's games and introduced it to the concept of storytelling. Emma demonstrates remarkable adaptability to non-standard life forms, observed Dr. Vashi, the Altarian xenobiologist who had joined the expedition. Her ability to form emotional connections appears to transcend species boundaries entirely. When they finally arrived at the Vorthak homeworld, Emma's first glimpse of the planet took her breath away. Through Ripley's organic viewing membrane, she could see a world that looked like it had been designed by someone with a very dark imagination. Massive crystalline spires jutted from scarred landscapes, while seas of what appeared to be liquid metal reflected 3 different colored suns. Storm systems that would have been devastating on Earth were apparently normal weather patterns, and the aurora effects in the upper atmosphere created displays of beauty and terror in equal measure. "It's scary," Emma said honestly, then added, "but it's beautiful too." Like a really dramatic painting, Emma perceives aesthetic value in Vorthak environmental parameters? Kaz asked, and his voice carried pleasure at her positive reaction. "It looks like where a dragon would live," she explained. Dangerous, but majestic. As Ripley descended toward the landing coordinates, Emma could see other bioships moving through the atmosphere, creatures of incredible size and variety, some resembling flying mountains, others moving with the fluid grace of cosmic jellyfish. The Vorthak had clearly mastered the art of biological engineering to a degree that made human technology look primitive by comparison. The landing platform was itself a living organism, its surface adjusting to accommodate Ripley's unique biosignature. As they disembarked, Emma found herself stepping onto a world that challenged every assumption she'd had about what planets could be like. The gravity was heavier than Earth normal, making each step require conscious effort. The air, while breathable thanks to Vorthak atmospheric processors, carried scents that were both alien and strangely familiar. Ozone and metal and something that might have been flowers if flowers had evolved to survive in an environment where everything else was trying to kill them. But it was the welcoming committee that truly took Emma's breath away. Kaz's family was waiting for them. 5 adult Vorthak whose size and presence made even Kaz look small by comparison. The largest, who Emma correctly guessed was Kaz's brood parent, stood nearly 15 feet tall and radiated an authority that was both magnificent and terrifying. "Brood parent Vashkartoth," Kaz said formally. Kaz presents Emma designation, friend-bonded human entity. The massive predator lowered her 3 heads to examine Emma with eyes like molten gold. For a long moment, child and apex predator stared at each other in mutual assessment. "Small flesh thing claims friend status with third spawned?" Vashkartoth's voice was deeper than Kaz's, carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate in Emma's bones. Emma, who had learned that Vorthak respected directness, squared her shoulders and looked up at the towering figure. "My name is Emma, and yes, Kaz is my best friend. He's really nice once you get to know him." The simple declaration caused a ripple of reaction among the assembled Vorthak. Several of them exchanged glances, or what passed for glances when you had 3 heads each, and Vashkartoth's posture shifted in a way that suggested surprise. "Third spawn demonstrates unusual social adaptation patterns," she observed. "Brood parent requires clarification. Emma designation perceives Kaz as nice?" He's really nice," Emma confirmed with the absolute conviction of a 7-year-old defending her friend. "He helps me with my art, and he shares food with me, and he listens when I tell stories. He's gentle and kind and funny." The words seemed to hang in the alien air like a challenge to everything the Vorthak understood about themselves. Around the landing platform, other Vorthak had begun to gather, drawn by curiosity about the strange small being who spoke of one of their kind in terms of kindness rather than lethality. "Demonstrate," Vashkartoth commanded. Emma looked confused. "Demonstrate what?" "Show brood parent how third spawned exhibits niceness." The request was clearly unprecedented, but Emma approached it with the same matter-of-fact problem-solving attitude she brought to all challenges. "Okay, hey Kaz, want to show your mom our art game?"
What followed was perhaps the most surreal display in the history of interspecies diplomacy. A 7-year-old human girl teaching a group of apex predators how to play collaborative drawing games. Using her tablet, Emma guided Kaz through the process of creating a picture together, each taking turns adding elements while the others suggested improvements. The gathered Vorthak watched in fascination as their traditionally solitary, competitive kinsmen engaged in cooperative creative activity. When Emma suggested that Kaz's artistic interpretation of their homeworld's crystal formations would be improved with maybe some happy colors, and Kaz actually considered the suggestion seriously, several of the observers made sounds that the translation systems couldn't adequately process. Third Spawn demonstrates behavioral modification for aesthetic purposes, one of Kaz's siblings observed. This represents unprecedented social adaptation. Collaboration produces unexpected results. Vashkartoth studied the tablet display, her 3 heads tilting as she examined the collaborative artwork. The drawing showed the Vorthak homeworld, but rendered in bright, cheerful colors that made the dangerous landscape look almost inviting. Crystal spires had been given rainbow hues, and the metal seas sparkled with added stars. Interesting perspective modification, she admitted grudgingly. Emma designation's aesthetic choices transform environmental interpretation. Want to try? Emma offered, holding out the tablet with the fearless generosity that had won over Kaz months earlier. It's really fun once you get the hang of it. The sight of a human child offering art supplies to a 15-foot apex predator whose species had never been known to create anything except destruction was captured by recording devices, but more importantly, it was burned into the memories of every vortex present. This was their first exposure to the concept of play, to creation for the sake of joy rather than utility, to the idea that interaction could be about sharing pleasure rather than establishing dominance. Vashkartoth accepted the tablet with the careful precision that Emma recognized from Kaz's early attempts at handling human technology. Her massive claws, designed for rending and tearing, moved with delicate uncertainty across the touchscreen. The interface responds to intentional contact, she murmured, echoing Kaz's first observations months earlier. Creation occurs through deliberate action rather than destructive force. You're doing great. Try making a line here. Ooh, I like that color choice. As word spread through the Vorthak settlement that the human child was teaching art to the broodmother, more and more Vorthak began to gather. They approached cautiously, maintaining respectful distances, but their curiosity was palpable. Many had never seen a non-Vorthak before, let alone a juvenile of any species who showed no fear in their presence. Emma, completely oblivious to the historical significance of the moment, began treating the gathering like an impromptu art class. Okay, everyone who wants to try drawing, form a line. We can take turns, and I'll help you figure out the tablet controls. The idea of Vorthak forming an orderly queue for any reason was absurd enough, but forming one to receive art instruction from a human child crossed into the realm of the impossible. Yet that was exactly what happened, as apex predators who had never waited for anything in their lives patiently took turns learning to create rather than destroy. By the end of the day, Emma had introduced 17 adult Vorthak to the concept of collaborative art. She had taught them about color theory, basic composition, and the radical idea that making something beautiful was its own reward. More importantly, she had shown them that their physical capabilities, those terrifying claws and impossible strength, Emma designation demonstrates remarkable instructional capabilities. Vashkartoth observed as the impromptu art class wound down. Broodparent begins to understand Third Spawn's behavioral modifications. Kaz is still the same person, Emma said, looking up at the massive predator with sincere affection. He just learned that there are more ways to use his strength than he knew before. Being strong doesn't mean you have to be scary all the time. The observation was delivered with such simple wisdom that several of the adult Vorthaks exchanged what might have been meaningful looks. They were beginning to understand that this small human had not changed Kaz. She had simply revealed capabilities that had always existed within him. As the three alien suns began to set, painting the crystalline landscape in spectacular colors that Emma insisted on capturing in a final collaborative drawing, Vash,